play will go under review.
Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday evening. Thank you so much for being here on this week's episode of Under Review. I hope everyone here is having a great evening so far, as I hear a really bad echo in my headphones. But this was a very exciting week for the Buffalo Bills as they take down the Seattle Seahawks to a tune of 31-10 in Seattle. And we're going to talk about that and this Buffalo Bills winning streak in detail. And joining me tonight is the person who is the reason I am at Cover One, someone I am very excited to have back on this program, back here as I close the tab as I realize why I had echo on my screen. Mr. Aaron Quinn, thank you so much for being here. I am dumb and just realized that I had the show streaming in a different tab on YouTube, and that's where the echo came from. So that's totally on me. That's a blunder, but
can't believe I let you join this network.
I was going to say,
come on, man.
Nah. I haven't had a mistake like that in like weeks, and go figure, I get you on the show and that happens. So wonderful.
No, you got to stop giving me credit. You actually did it yourself. I don't know if people know, I was doing Spaces for a while, which I don't do anymore because it's crazy in the Spaces world. But when we were doing it Friday mornings, you would come on and there's a bit of nonsense that got said in Spaces when we would let people on and speak, and then you would come on every day, and I could hear you clanking in the gym, working hard, but you always had great points. And so over time here, I would talk to Eric and be like, hey man, this Joe guy made another really good point, brought some data to back it up. So you did it all yourself. You took advantage of the opportunity of being able to talk with us. So you got to stop giving me credit, man. It's I'm just a dummy. Like actually I saw in your intro, my sign said I'm an idiot. Couldn't be further. Couldn't be more true.
Listen,
I was just a lucky idiot to find you.
So I had built that intro, and I was like, I got to put Aaron in it just because, again, like and I appreciate all of that, Aaron. Thank you very much. But like, you were the first person I actually contacted to get here. So I was like, it's only fitting that I put him in the intro. And then after I built it and I like edited it and put it together and had it ready to roll, I noticed that sign was in it, and I'm like, oh, I hope he doesn't like. Oh, I hope that's not like bad. Like I can remove it, but let me just see. But
hey, actually what's the worst is I had that I am an idiot. I love calling myself an idiot. I'm the first one. I think people think on Twitter that I do take myself serious because like my takes are like, I'm very certain about my takes, but this is all jokes. I'm an idiot. I don't care. But in our Cover One Pass one, Greg and I had cut last year. I had it right after Jason Whitlock had said something stupid. And my sign said Whitlock is a moron or something. And so it was in every single ad was Whitlock is a moron. So
dude, I remember that. I remember that too. And I would always catch it a little bit. And they would sometimes make me giggle because I'm like, damn, like that sign is great. And I know they had that like probably right after that happened. But yeah, man, listen, appreciate all the kind words. It's a ton of fun to be doing this show. Always happy to have you here. And I'm really excited for tonight's discussion because we're talking about this Bills winning streak, the Seattle game, and really the past 3 games in more detail, and just really going over the things that we felt were the biggest contributors to their success over the past few weeks and how that can continue as they face Miami in Buffalo and ideally try to claim some more wins before the daunting task of playing Kansas City comes when they play them in week 11. But first and foremost, Aaron, just your thoughts on Sunday's game, what you liked, what you didn't like, and how it's making you feel going ahead.
Yeah, I won't lie. Like, I do get a little nervous still. I'm not nervous mafia necessarily, but I respect the NFL, right? Even the bad teams, I think, can catch you. There's not a big separation between the good and the bad teams. There's maybe a little bit bigger separation between the really good teams and the bad teams, but when you are dealing with, in preparation for this show, we had Ben Baldwin on our preview show, and I love Ben Baldwin's work, and I use it every day. And in preparation, I use a lot of that data plus film. And when I'm getting into the Seahawks, man, they were just like everything pulled up that this is straight up a top 10 NFL team, right? And so going into that, I have all the narratives in the back of my mind of the Bills don't play great always against good teams, right? They beat up on the bad teams and they kind of, they go at it with some of the good teams and they've won some of those games, but they don't win them all. And then you add in that it's a long trip over to the West Coast. Obviously, we hear about Seattle and what a difficult place to play there is, and add in the weather, the potential of weather. And so I was a little nervous, and I picked it as a 1-point victory with a Tyler Bass walk-off kick to win the game, which wouldn't have felt great for it to come down to that. And instead, we got a team that really came out and punched the other team in the mouth. And with all the narratives leading up to the week of, the Bills never start off hot. The Bills, Sean McDermott doesn't win games against good teams, things like that. They really kind of just punched all the narratives in the mouth. And they came out and they started out hot. They kind of addressed that narrative and they continued throughout the day. And the big thing for me was watching that Seattle team and that offense specifically was the Bills have struggled to tackle in the past.
Yeah.
They forming tackles, but they miss a lot of tackles when they do that. And the defense gets away with it and you get the bend but don't break. But for me, it was they had to really bring their shoulder pads to this game. And they did it. They checked all those boxes for me.
I had very similar thoughts going into this game, mainly about it being close, because it wasn't even just the fact that Seattle was I think 4-3 at the time team. And, they play in a tough division. So you just assume that record's kind of fortified. And of all the talent they have, especially Kenneth Walker, I'm sitting here thinking like, well, the Bills haven't had great run D consistently this year. The tackling issue, as you alluded to. And then even without DK Metcalf, Walker, who could be such a threat as a runner and a passer, as well as Jackson Smith-Njigba, who I love, and as well as Tyler Lockett. Like, I was fully expecting this to be a shootout. And it wasn't really me saying that the Bills defense is bad or anything, but when you go to Seattle, which is notoriously a difficult place to play, you're expecting there to be miscues, right? Penalties, which there were. Issues with communication, especially defensively, and ultimately that leading to a game that's going to be very close for comfort. And while there were some components of that in this game, obviously Seattle had 2 straight goal line attempts that did not work, and they ended up getting no points off of either. You also talk about the miscues they had. It was an absolute coast for the Bills at times. The offense seemed to be borderline unstoppable, where the only thing that was getting in their way was themselves, with, again, some untimely penalties. But Josh Allen was absolutely dialed in. The running game was fluid and beating them up. The run blocking was exceptional. The pass pro was almost as exceptional, with a few miscues and mixed in. I think it was really one of the strongest offensive performances to date. I would call it Josh Allen's second best game of the season. And when you talk about narratives being busted, I mean, we could go into detail about so many different things. If you want to talk about run defense, Kenneth Walker, 9 carries for 12 yards, averaging 1.3 yards per carry, which is absolutely unbelievable when you think of how good Walker's been, especially with their line. You could talk about the Bills running play action shots, where they did on the very first snap of the game and in multiple drives that worked extremely well. Just so many things for this team that led to a lot of optimism going forward. And I think that with going into Seattle, winning that game, coming back to Buffalo, you have to feel good, even with a Dolphins team that I will always consider tough, no matter what our record is, no matter what it is. You have to feel good about what they could be going forward, especially when you realize I don't think this is the strongest they are yet. Like, I genuinely don't. So just any final thoughts, Aaron, on that matchup before we get a little more into the winning streak itself?
Yeah, I mean, that's my hope, is that they aren't playing their best football. I said that on the post-game show. Like, it's been pretty good here the last couple of weeks, and that I hope that this isn't their best football. We want to see them really hit their stride after the holidays, right? We want to get through December here and keep stacking wins along the way and playing wins, but not that you don't want to play good football all the time, but I do think you want to be playing your best football heading into January, right? And go on a streak and go on a run here. But things have shaped up real well for the Bills, not just compiling some wins along the way, but everything else, right? There, you talk about having Miami come in, like, sure, Miami has a chance to beat you anytime, right? Tyreek Hill can line up. Like, there's a lot of stuff that could go wrong against a team like Miami. And in previewing that matchup, it's hard to get a read on who Miami is because Tua's been gone so long. And obviously Tua's a huge piece, as we've seen over the last month of football. Without him, this team looks one of the worst teams in the NFL. And so are they that, or is Tua got to get going? But it really doesn't matter, because I think the Bills have kind of jumped out to such a lead, and they are such a good team. They aren't the Dolphins of last year, where I don't think they're going to collapse at the end, that it feels like they've got a good full arm's length on the division here while they're playing some good football. So the only thing is, you talked about that. A lot of people have mentioned, well, DK Metcalf wasn't in this game. And I'm a big fan of DK Metcalf's, right? I respect the crap out of him. And he does change what they're able to do offensively in terms of pushing the ball down the field. I think in the red zone, he's a huge threat, especially against some of the Bills secondary. But the Bills are also banged up, right? Like my big concern going into the game was, on the interior defensive line, it hasn't been great in pass rush. I think Ed Oliver's been recovering from an injury. You saw him playing a little bit better here this last week, which tells me he's coming back a little bit from that injury. But then the middle of the field there without Bernard, obviously Milano's still out. You have two backup linebackers. Safety has had some struggles throughout the year, and I think a lot of it's been pinned on DeMar Hamlin. But the game before, Taylor Rapp did not play well against the Titans. One of his worst games that we've seen as a Buffalo Bill, was exposed a lot in play action, moving him around. And DeMar has limitations that you can expose with certain things, with a Noah Fan up the seam or getting Kenneth Walker on him one-on-one. And those were some concerns that I was having in that game, is that middle of the defense, the spine, and can they attack? And I think they stepped up to the challenge.
Yeah.
Like the linebackers, got caught a few times. Dorian Williams got caught flat-footed a couple of times, but it wasn't bleeding out. And they were swarmed to the ball and tackling. So those are all good signs that they can play through having no Terrell Bernard, no Matt Milano against a team that really attacks that middle area of the field with running backs and tight ends and things like that. And so seeing them play to their strengths and try to hide some of their weaknesses was great coaching. I think we saw great coaching in the Bills getting ready for this game and being and starting off to a fast start. And you heard Sean McDermott kind of in that victory speech that we see in the locker room. It was more than I've ever seen of him giving every single unit of coaching and preparation groups and the coaching staff credit in that game. And I do think it matters. And it showed in a game like this where you are down a little bit and you have some players that are backup players in big spots. I think that they stepped up to the challenge. And McDermott says this all the time too, that those guys getting the reps, that's going to pay dividends later in the season when we need those guys, when we're going to have to pull somebody off the bench and it's not going to be AJ Klein, right? Like you're going to pull somebody that's got some good reps and is still young and has built up some stuff. So I think that was a big one. But yeah, no, the Bills coming out and handling of what I still think is a very good team is a great sign going forward here.
Yeah, agreed. And again, not every game will be that easy. They could very well play Miami this Sunday and play, if it's down to their level, or just play at a level where it's very evenly matched. Miami, in the games they've lost, there's been plenty in that Josh Allen winning streak or in that record that have been very close for comfort. I could think of the 2022 home game. I could think of even last year for the first 3 quarters before the Bills started pulling away. And I have a lot of confidence that the Bills can really capitalize in terms of game script, because when their offense gets to a fast start, it's very difficult, especially for Miami of all teams, to keep up with them, because Miami predicates on beating you up with their speed runners and bouncing outside. And if you have a situation where they're down early and they can't really afford to waste time, or they want to waste time, because that seems to be the only thing they do, even when they're losing, you find yourself in a good spot. But when I look at this Seattle game, there are takeaways from it that make me really encouraged. And one of the biggest ones when we talk about defense, and we'll get a little more into it for the winning streak eventually, but it's really the fact that the best offense you saw Seattle have was when they had to go up tempo, because when they had time and Geno was trying to call plays, he was having a hard time. And they said it themselves, diagnosing what the Bills defense was doing post snap and how they were mixing up coverages and disguising. And these types of things, along with the pass rush that, yes, Seattle's O-line is weakened, but other teams haven't had the same level of success when you're talking about pressuring, at least as consistently as the Bills were able to get on Geno when he had to hold the ball in this game. To me, these are takeaways that I can look at and say, I could see this going into that December or January run potentially, where the Bills aren't going to change the formula of what they do defensively. And if they're really good at mixing up these coverages, and now you're getting Von Miller coming back to aid in that pass rush, that could be even more daunting. I think that's a very big potential for success, or at least a recipe for success when you get to those more crucial moments, December, January, and hopefully on a Super Bowl run. So I'm very encouraged, very excited, and really looking forward to seeing what happens this Sunday. Again, you said it before a little bit. It is an opportunity to kind of put this away, even though it kind of feels put away. beating the Dolphins at home, who right now are your closest competitor at 2-5, to send them down to 2-6 and just give yourself kind of that grace of like, we're at 7-2. We've beaten the division 3 times already. We just have 3 matchups left. Like, so at the very worst, we could only be 500. It's something that I want them to do. I think they can do, and I'm looking forward to seeing. But let's get a little more into the winning streak itself, Aaron, and talk about really offense to start. And you could, highlight any of the people or just like the concepts or anything you feel were the biggest contributors, starting with that, win against the Jets, going into this win against Seattle. Who were the biggest players or biggest, I guess you'd call it, pieces, or what were the biggest concepts that you could say were the biggest contributors to this winning streak?
I think Aaron Cromer to start, and this offensive line. Sean McDermott, again, talks about this a lot, and I think this has been a lot of the success when they have won games has been winning the trenches. It's such a cliche in football. If you win the trenches, you're going to win games. And this offensive line, man, when you do, I'm not a film guy, so I hate even saying, oh, when I watch the film, but when you do turn it on, there's so many times where this offensive line, I swear to God, there's probably 5 or 6 James Cook runs where he's got like a 5x5. He could build a shed in the middle of the line. And like, even when it's not there, he's shifty enough and he can squeeze through the tight spaces, but you don't want James Cook to have to squeeze through tight spaces on every run. Right. And they're just running these power zone schemes over and over again. And Nate Tice has shown like from all different ways. And that's Aaron Cromer cooking that stuff up, right? He's a run game guy. He is developing this run game and they're leaning into it. And what that has done, I know that there's a lot of statistics out there that say you don't have to run to set up play action, but it doesn't hurt to be able to have that in the bag when you have successful run. Defenses do sell out harder for it. And the Bills are lining up. And for like 3 or 4 weeks, it was like 98% predictability that when they were in under center, they were going to run it. And so then you go out on first down and you get under center. Teams have those tendency reports too. And then you play action pass right over the top of them. We saw Knox go for a huge explosive to start the game there. Being able to dominate the line of scrimmage. I think Deion Dawkins is probably having the best season of his career right now. He is playing at his absolute prime at this moment. And really just across this offensive line, Spencer Brown, some issues with penalties. I've been trying to comb through some of the penalties because I think some of them are kind of iffy. Some of them I don't care that much. Like some of the holding ones, like if you're holding and Josh Allen's not getting hit, like I can live with if you held up a guy for a second to save Josh Allen from taking a hit. I can live with that. The pre-snap stuff, that stuff's got to get cleaned up a little bit, but I've even seen some of the pre-snap stuff be a little iffy and tight calls by the officials. So there's some mud in the conversation about the penalties the offensive line's committing, but Aaron Cromer to me has been the piece that has set this offense going forward. And then you just talk about, if you want to talk about it real quick, Khalil Shakir's efficiency, right? Like we saw the struggles when he wasn't in, and then when he is back in, even when he wasn't back in at 100%, I think we saw him closer this week to 100%. But I go back a couple of weeks ago to that one drive where he caught 5 targets on a drive, and they were just spamming the screen game because the run game wasn't really doing much in that moment. So they just started spamming the screen game as an extension of the run. And that's awesome that you have the ability to do that. How many years have we been trying to get the screen game working? And now the Bills have it in Khalil Shakir. And that feels like a free 8 yards every time the guy gets a screen, right? And it could be a 25-yarder the way he plays. And then the last point I want to make is the development over the last month of Keon Coleman, right? Like I wasn't super high on the pick. I won't lie about that. And I thought that the development, I could see the picture. I could see the athleticism. I could see where they wanted him. And I think he's really impressed me with his development in the game. And I think the conversation about his PFF blocking grade is probably overblown and we're probably overdoing it a little bit, but his willingness to get in there and do it. And I think the first few weeks, there were some struggles when I turned on the film of engaging in those blocks and getting on them. And to see him working at that and getting better at it as he goes here and getting more on the same page with Josh and Josh building that trust. These are all super positive things. And now you're getting to a point where I said this to Greg the other day, like, I think Khalil Shakir is a legitimate 1B. Like, I'm not sure that he's that, whatever you want to call alpha wide receiver 1, but I do think he is a legitimate 1B, highly productive, one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. I do think Amari Cooper is that alpha guy and will get the target. I know people were frustrated with the targets. They'll come. And him just being on the field pulling gravity is something that's going to matter. And with that, in the development of Keon Coleman, I think Keon Coleman can be a legitimate wide receiver too, or maybe also a 1B at some point. And now you're just opening up a whole bag for Brady and Cromer to really do a lot, with obviously the threat of the run game with Ray Davis coming along here over the last couple of weeks, kind of supplying that complementary back to James Cook. They're just so dynamic in what they can do. It's really keeping defenses on their heels. I always try to look at, Joe, when we do our matchups, I always try to look up, how would a defensive coordinator prepare for a team like this? And when I try to put that lens back on the Buffalo Bills, I don't know. I don't know what it is you do, because you obviously have so many threats with Josh Allen himself, but then you open up like two pretty good tight ends. We saw Dawson Knox get multiple explosive plays in this game, right? And that was a quiet multiple explosive game. I think he had the 2 catches for 50 yards there.
Yeah.
Kincaid hasn't really gone off in the way that we wanted, but I'm okay with that. With everybody else's eating, I think he'll get his. They'll be there. But what do you do? You can't sleep on any one of these skill position players, and I think that makes things really tough. And then to your point on the defensive side too, man, not to just keep dragging this out, but on the defensive side, we thought there was going to be a huge change in the Bills' philosophy on the defensive side of the ball, with whether it was Babbage coming in or new defensive backs coaches. And they really have just leaned into what they do well and changing even that stuff. And we heard Brady talking about it a lot in the broadcast of this game, of saying this is a tough team to play against because it does look vanilla. And people accuse Sean McDermott constantly of just being oh, it's vanilla, soft zone. That couldn't be further from the truth. This is a very progressive defense that does a lot of stuff pre-post snap. And I think, people want DeMar Hamlin benched. I think that's part of the problem, is there's so much on the plate of these defensive backs and passing things off into coverage and coverage responsibilities that you have to be on it in this defense. And it really is a 1 of 11. As long as those back 7 guys are all doing the things they're supposed to do, there's not a lot of windows for quarterbacks to throw, and you're going to have to make the right decision 10 times to get down the field. And I'm going to take my chances that teams are not going to be able to make 10 to 12 correct decisions 4 to 5 times a game to outscore your offense. And that's a good position to be. And I think all those things leading up makes this a really difficult team to beat consistently. They're going to lose games. They're going to lose games to good teams, but they're not going to go lose a lot of games when you're playing that way in the NFL.
At this moment in time, and those were all great points, I truly think that we are finally beginning to see the best version of this Bills team, but I don't think we've even gotten there yet, as I said before. I think that there are still things to be cleaned up that once they do, if they do, but I'm hoping once they do, they truly are going to be a juggernaut. And I even think right now in this moment of time, beyond their imperfections, they're playing like a juggernaut. Will that continue? We got to see. Yeah. I'm very optimistic about it because the past 3 games have given me a reason to. Granted, the Jets game was really them kind of waking up from their coma of a 2-game losing streak and trying to find themselves again. But that was when I first saw the offense kind of show life again, show consistency again. The running game looked good. The passing game was looking efficient. It wasn't always perfect, but they were moving down the field pretty well against a very good Jets defense. And I'm sitting here thinking, this is even before Amari Cooper. Wow, it's not all doom and gloom. They can make this work. They just got to, probably get a little more creative in what they're showing pre to post snap, whether that's more motion, whether that's more play action, whether that's more under center, or maybe however you want to marry those 3 concepts. To me, that is the answer to solving your problem and getting separation, is using the scheme to get it. Now you add in Amari Cooper, and that presence, even if the second game was just 1 miscue where he fell down and 1 other reception, his presence is enough to bolster everybody else here, because now what you have is someone, and I believe you pointed this out, Aaron, I know Eric, Anthony, a lot of people in our network have, but the fact that he can be on an island now and generate separation on his own means all the opportunities you wanted for the rest of this receiving cast, or this cast of pass catchers, be it running backs, tight ends too, it becomes more dynamic and more possible, because you can't just ignore the glaring, obvious receiver matchup that's in front of you. And if you do that, you're going to be in trouble, because then once that rapport gets built with Josh, all of a sudden it's going to be hard to stop and you have to pivot. So I loved your points about Cromer, because Aaron Cromer, I would build a statue for that man right now outside of one Bills drive. I think his presence for this offensive line has such a dramatic impact on what they can do offensively, and he deserves more credit for what he's done. But when you talk about a team that we've been talking about, like you said, ramping up play action and getting it going more. To have a coach who can get the best out of this offensive line from a run blocking standpoint beyond pass blocking, and now being able to have teams respect what you do, plays right into your hand as an offense, because now these play action threats that they're starting to show more and more as the weeks go on become so much more intimidating for a defense, to a point where I don't care how good your corners are. I don't care how good your safeties are. And Seattle has a mix of very good corners and safeties and some good linebackers. They were getting exposed in their passing defense, and they were getting kind of torched at times. And that's just a great example of how important that coach and building up that room makes this offense so much better. And I love that you bring it up, because I just, again, think he deserves a lot more credit for what he's done. I love the point about Khalil Shakir, because I think Khalil Shakir has taken that step forward that we were hoping he would. Not to say he wasn't showing flashes in the second half of last year. He was the team's most productive receiver, but it wasn't a fluke, or it wasn't like he regressed. He's as good as advertised. He's working the middle of the field well. He is such a dependable slot target. And I've talked over the past few weeks, Aaron, about Josh being a very trust-based quarterback. Khalil Shakir is the guy he trusts the most. It's a guy that he turns to in those third and pinch situations where you need to throw to a target quickly. And Shakir is rewarding him by getting open and having sure hands. And when you talk about the screen game and how they tried with Samuel to get it going more consistently, and it just wasn't really working, Shakir has galvanized that. It's made it respectable. And I think that his presence, too, has been just such a big contributor. And I love that you bring up Keon Coleman. Again, I'm very pleased with this development. I want to see him continue. How they've used him, where he's been, and the success he's had has been so much fun to watch. But honestly, I only have my points kind of branch off yours a bit, because you brought up Amari Cooper briefly. I think Amari Cooper's presence is an exponential night and day difference for how formidable this Bills passing attack is. And just his presence, again, for the reasons I stated before, but now knowing that he's kind of in the back of your mind if he's on the field in a potential pass or run look that the Bills show you, that just makes him more multiple. And this offense, to me, feels like, and I'm going to say this, it might be a bold statement, Aaron, I think it's shaping up to be the best offense that they've had since 2021, and maybe the best offense of the Josh Allen era so far. Is it there yet? No, I am not saying it's there yet. Granted, advanced metrics love them. They're still in the top 10 in so many categories.
Yeah.
But I think they're getting to a point where they are actually as formidable as they've been for Josh Allen with all these pass catchers. This running game helps. All of these things help.
It's more balanced than ever.
Exactly. And being balanced helps. But with Amari Cooper, his presence on the field is commanding so much respect that, again, it's just a symbiotic relationship with the rest of these pass catchers and him. Yeah. James Cook, I have to give the nod to. Again, he's been exceptional. Ray Davis has been a great compliment, but I think James Cook as a runner himself has just emerged, has taken another step forward. He, at times, is just absorbing contact so well, moving through it so well, and his vision looks great. And, good run blocking.
Holding on to the ball.
Built from that. Holding on to the ball, that is another key detail. But, the O-line and the blocking and everything you said about Cromer helps with that. But now it's building his development up, and it's making him more confident. And, I mean, the run that he ran into Ernest Jones and knocked his helmet off, I mean, I literally just let out the biggest, ooh, when I saw that, because I could not believe that James Cook just trucked this linebacker and looked dominant. And by the way, when James Cook plays a game that Kevin Burkhardt is calling, he turns into prime Barry Sanders. Can we talk about this real fast? The two Fox game that he's been on, he has been the best running back in NFL history. It's genuinely insane. But the final point I'm going to make is a tip of the cap to Joe Brady, specifically for the Seattle game, but more in Tennessee. And I talked about this with Ant, because after he did his episode with Mina Kimes, one of the biggest things they talked about was the Bills need to ramp up their play action. And I messaged him and kind of went on a tangent about how annoyed I am that they haven't done enough, and he agreed. And then after the game was over, I was just like, dude, holy shit. And he's like, I know. And they just did the thing they were supposed to do, which is ramp up play action. And I think Joe Brady has called, honestly, 3 pretty good games. Obviously, still some things that, for me personally, I'd like to see a little bit different. But I thought the Seattle game was an excellent job from him, introducing play action early, introducing motion on what seemed to be 29 of the 35 passing snaps, so an 82% click. All these things that you wanted him to do, it seems like he's doing it more consistently. And I'm very excited for the future and hope he keeps it up. And those are mine for offense. So, Aaron, I've been talking a while. Any final thoughts on that before we pivot over to defense?
Yeah, I mean, on the Shakir one, the question was, could the efficiency continue, right? Like to your point of last year, we saw him really come on, but like, could he really maintain that type of efficiency? He's like probably the most efficient wide receiver in the NFL, and you compared it to previous offenses for the Bills, and I think one of the things that could separate this Bills team, besides having the balance of the run game and the best offensive line we've had with Josh Allen, which are huge contributors to it being a better offense, is Beasley was such an important part of that
Mm,
offense, and figuring out that slot role has been really a challenge since Beasley left. And now that Shakir's here, and I do think Shakir could do some of the other things. He could play outside, but now that you have Cooper and now that you have Coleman and the way they've built this roster, you don't need him to. You can really allow him to work out of the slot. And I think he's a Beasley plus. And I don't mean any disrespect to Cole Beasley. I thought he was a great player for what he did,
mhm.
a really great slot receiver. But Khalil Shakir so much more. He can do the gadget stuff. He can take a screen 20 yards. He can just he's shifty. He can go up and get it. Like he can stretch the field. He can do so many different things that put so much stress on the middle of the field. And when you use him in motion, like motion's cool. There isn't a lot of data that shows that motion actually makes your offense better. Like the
Mhm.
EPA with motion or without it, not much of a change.
Still got to be talented. Still got to
But
be good.
yeah, but when it's Khalil Shakir and you're moving a piece that can do everything, he could take a handoff, he can take an orbit screen 20 yards. That changes everything for a defensive coordinator because now you have to lock in, you have to shift your defense to wherever he is. And so I think that's a big one. And then kind of coupled into that, my last point is you mentioned Brady. And man, I will say one of my biggest criticisms of Dorsey and even the first stretch of Joe Brady's career here has been dialing up specific things to get your playmakers involved in games and getting these guys touches and manufacturing touches in space. And we saw that with, like I said, on that one series where it was just spamming Khalil Shakir in the screen game. Like he wasn't super part of the offense for a minute, and being able to manufacture that stuff is to me the sign of a good playmaker in getting
Mm.
those guys involved in the game. And that's been my biggest frustration over the last year and a half of Bill's offense is when stuff starts to stagnate and you're not creating offense, that's on the offensive coordinator to draw something up. Like if Khalil Shakir's not getting touches naturally in the flow of the offense, you have to find a way to manufacture that guy touches to get him involved in the game. And seeing him do that with both, with running backs and getting Keon Coleman some touches. And we didn't see it with Amari
Mm.
Cooper so much this week, but I know that's going to come too, is
Yeah.
a great sign to know that, hey, when a guy's not involved in the game, we can dial something up to get them involved in the game. I think that's a big part that's been missing. And so definitely shout out to Brady for that.
Yeah, and a few weeks ago, I did a show with the guys from Bills Chat, and we were talking about what can this Bills offense to do to get better, and kind of all agreed on the same points. Where it felt like there was a bit too much predictability in the offensive play calling, and the sequencing didn't feel great, felt
Yeah.
stagnated. But there were also times in those games where the play design was there, and maybe Josh wasn't playing his best ball, like the Matt Collins would have been touchdown, which ultimately proved to be the difference in that game.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think he was fully to blame, but definitely had some blame. And I feel like, yes, you can make an argument that adding Amari Cooper can make an OC probably a little bit better just because you have the talent, but you still got to scheme these guys open. You still got to work around it, and you still got to create the mismatches. And I think what Joe Brady's been able to do for Keon Coleman, for Khalil Shakir, and also for Dalton Kincaid, who I know we briefly mentioned before, hasn't really gone off, but has definitely been more involved, which, I'll take a 3 reception, 4 reception, 50-yard game from Kincaid every single week,
Yep.
100%. Like, those are encouraging signs to me of Joe Brady kind of getting the feel for it more. Not that he was so inexperienced or that he's a rookie, but rather with the context of this team and this season, kind of finding what's working best, ironing out the kinks, getting the things that he feels don't work as well out of the playbook, but really keying in on the things that Josh finds more comfort with, but also, again, the things that metrically speaking benefit the Bills the most, like play action, like under center, working those in. I'd still like to see them worked in even a little bit more, but just seeing an increase in that rate, seeing them go up on that to me is just very refreshing. And I'm happy that from 3 weeks ago to now, we're seeing a lot more from Joe Brady in that regard schematically. And I'm very encouraged and hoping that if Cooper's ramp up continues, that even, half of what your expectations truly could be, I still think is a huge boost for this offense, and I'm pumped. So
Yeah, and there's a lot that I was just talking to my mailman Charlie, who I talk about all the time on our show. He's a great dude, and we talk all the time. And I know like people are down on Samuel, but like the Bills are going to get Curtis Samuel back at some point. He
Yeah.
hasn't been healthy since training camp, right? That turf toe, I think, lingered, and he's got another injury dealing with. And I do think like getting him back and now not needing him to be the second best target in your passing game and just having an additional target. You saw some of the stuff that we saw Virgil come in and doing the motion stuff.
Yeah.
And they didn't run anything for Virgil, but they're setting stuff up, right? Like everything they do is intentional. And all those looks are intentional. You're getting looks on film, and eventually those are going to be set up into stuff. So we haven't even seen the full bag of tricks, and I hope we don't until January, right? Like some of this stuff's going to be set up for late in the season, so you don't want to pull out your full bag of tricks yet. But I've seen slowly some things being set up where I don't know if Brady's going there, but I visualize some plays that can be going there. And I think it's going to be even more potent once hopefully the Bills get fully healthy here. And these players that we've talked about throughout this continue to develop, because I only see Kincaid and Coleman continuing their growth as the season goes on. They're such young players. They're only going to get better. So yeah, the sky is really the limit. What I would say is in judging towards the past teams, remember that defenses are not playing the same way they were in 2020 and 2021, right? The NFL landscape has changed, and how we're seeing really more like the Bills. Like Sean McDermott was leading a lot of the way the NFL defenses are playing in terms of the too high safety coverages and stuff like that. So the numbers won't probably be as crazy as they were in 2021. But I do think this offense will be just as potent as we've ever seen.
I agree with that. And again, really encouraged. I really like that you brought up the Virgil motion too, because I forgot about that. And I saw his number on the first snap. I'm like, oh, there he is. I didn't think he was going to be on the field this quickly. And that first jet sweep is going to hit so hard. I just hope they do it at the right time. And, that's where I also want to kind of like think about what I said about Brady and give him a little grace too, because it is a long season. You can't put everything out there immediately. And also getting a feel for what does or doesn't work is really what September is all about, especially with less preseason weeks. So I, didn't want to fire the guy after that 2-week stretch as much as I just needed to see a pivot, and he's pivoted. So that's something you want, growth and change. Maybe they'll hit another skid again, but ultimately, again, give yourself enough cushion, get a nice enough record before that ever happens, if it ever happens. And I'm comfortable. I think they could suffice, and then try to retool things for a potential playoff push. And this offense has been fun. I hope it continues. And as Dr. Jekyll here says that I've prompted on the screen for about 30 minutes, hit the like button, guys. It's very much appreciated. If you guys are new guests or watchers of this show, feel free to drop a like on this video. That helps our channel out so much. All of you on audio platforms, 5 stars, that'd be appreciated. And Aaron, before we segue to defense, I think it's a good time to plug the one pass, don't you think? Like, might as well mention that thing we got going on. And everybody, for those of you who might not be aware, who might not have checked the show out, we have the Cover One Pass, where you could become an insider and join our premium Discord. That One Pass membership is the lifeblood of our network, as it allows us to have access to all of the resources that we use on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year, minute-to-minute, second-to-second basis for each and every one of you. Whether we pull the data, whether we pull the film, all of your memberships, everyone who joins us, one, we appreciate you so much, and 2, helps us out immensely. So if you are interested in getting access to some premium content, like I mentioned before, the Discord, as well as some of the giveaways we have going on, like this month's where we're giving away a piece of wall art from Hexhead Art, as well as a signed 11x14 Teron Johnson autograph picture. I already said signed, autograph, whatever. You are welcome to sign up. The link is in the description below. $60 a year, get access to everything. And we appreciate each and every one of you that has signed up so far. It's kind of surreal doing this read, knowing Aaron is on the screen and on the other side of me, because I usually just pull the video up, but like his physical presence is here. Aaron, do you want to say anything else about the one pass before we move on?
Yeah, if I happen to win the Taron Johnson picture, there was no foul play. Like, it just happened that way. One of my favorite players. Like, if anybody doesn't know it, I was standing for Taron way before he became who he is. But no, my only pitch is we are a truly independent network, and that is what helps us to, like you said, to help get new content creators, get more content. A lot of people try to act like they're independent, but they're not. They have big budgets behind it. We don't. We are truly independent, and this is the best way to support the network. If you like the work we do, and it's a benefit to you, the Discord is a lot of fun. It is constant. I had to actually mute my computer when we were coming on here because the Discord notifications were just going off constantly. And that's honestly a lot of the times where I see my news comes in Discord. I get a notification in Discord, somebody throws a tweet in there, and I jump over to Twitter and we'll post on top of it. But it is a very active community of like-minded fans. If you're here and you're enjoying this type of content, or you like the film room or whatever, any pieces of the Cover One content, there's like-minded people there that want to discuss football with you. And it's so much better than on social media. People treat each other with respect. We have conversations about football. There's more in-depth talk there. And you're not limited to the characters of social media or the weird text tone separation that happens, or people trying to one up each other on social media. It's all just a good conversation that happens in Discord. So it's a great community, and we'd love you to be part of it.
Absolutely. I love the Discord. I love engaging with the people in there. Multiple channels too, even just beyond Bills Talk. Like we started a music one, and that's been fun. With there's a food one, there's a tailgate meetup one, all these different things, but like-minded Bills fans. So seriously, if you guys are interested, sign up in the link below, and the winners of that contest will be announced November 4th. I'm halfway tempted to go for a different Aaron, just so I could start the announcement with Aaron, make him think he wins, and then just go for a different last name. Beautiful build-up, immense disappointment. But no, we thank all of you for being here, and I'm very appreciative of Ariola Grande reminding me of the Yankees game that I am unfortunately going to throw on after the show's over. Please allow, even if they win tonight, I got no hope. But let's move on to defense, where I do have hope. And again, winning streak of 3 games, and the defense has had I would say, very good performances in all 3. Obviously, the Tennessee game, it seemed like it took them a little time to get their bearings down, but they settled down and had another standard at this point second half turnaround where they just shut that offense down completely. The Jets game was a mixed bag, but I felt they came through in key moments, which is what you want in a competitive game. And then of course this most recent game, which I thought might have been their best performance of the season when you talk about who they were up against, the circumstances they were dealing with, and how they performed. Aaron, floor is yours. 3-game winning streak, your favorite parts of this defense and the biggest contributors of such.
Yeah, I will say the results and the numbers of this defensive performance this last week are a little muddied with some of the mistakes that happened for Seattle, right? I don't know what would have happened on that 4th down play if Geno doesn't trip, but the Bills did stuff him a couple times going into that to make it a 4th down play, right? The fumble over his head, that's wonky. And definitely saved the Bills there on a bend but don't break drive. But overall, this defense really has been playing well. There's a lot of communication. You see it pre-post snap. They seem locked in on that back 7 in terms of the communication side of it. You don't see a ton of mistakes. Cam Lewis gets a little lost in coverage at times, but that's also fine. That's expected from a dime backer, right? That's not a starter position. I do think there's some vulnerabilities to this defense that haven't been fully exposed. And I do think we're going to see some games that are frustrating, right? That offenses move the ball up and down this team and are able to get some explosive plays on them. They're going to make mistakes. You're going to see DeMar Hamlin take a bad angle and not have the athleticism to make up for it. But safeties are doing that all over the league. I think if we judge this team against their peers, this is a top 10 easily. I'd argue trending towards top 5 defense in the NFL. And I think that's a great thing. And when we're going to get Von Miller back here this week. I don't know what that ramp up for Von coming back is going to be. And I hate to say it like this, obviously, because of the situation associated with the suspension, but it's been a little bit of a blessing in disguise to have an aging veteran player like that be forced to take a month off and not put tread on his tire. You know what I mean? Like, the less tread you can put on Von Miller's tires and not have to rely on him is better. And you were still able to win and do some things there. So that's actually, I think, a small benefit. And I don't know that he'll ramp up right away and come back right into playing, but it's much needed to get him back in here because he is still performing at a pretty high level when it comes to pressuring the quarterback before his suspension. So that's going to be a nice added benefit. I think we're going to see Terrell Bernard here coming back here maybe this week, but probably over the next couple of weeks. McDermott sort of alluded to that there is a plan for Milano. We don't know when it's going to be, but there's a plan in place for him to come back. That's going to be huge. And in the meantime, you've developed some reps for guys like a Dorian Williams, for Balin Spector, who is a limited player, but I've liked some of what I've seen out of Balin Spector here. Taron Johnson, absolutely. We saw without Taron Johnson what this defense looks like. And then you see now that he's back and healthy, what this defense looks like back with him. I don't ever want to hear any arguments about taking Taron Johnson off the field again. I know there was a lot of that talk this offseason of like, hey, we got to get into some bigger packages and some bigger looks. Taron Johnson's the best run defender at the second level in this defense. And that even includes some of the linebackers. Like, I still think Taron is better in those situations. There was a play that I shared. It was a pass play. Kenneth Walker, the third, one of the best in this situation of open field, off a pass, a swing pass, gets the ball. He gets the ball with a 1 yard gain. Taron's like 5-6 yards back, comes up, makes an open field tackle. Most other situations, that's like a 15-20 yard gain for Kenneth Walker, right? And he stopped him and lead into a 3rd and long. So that's been great. Christian Benford's been playing at an exceptional level. Again, I think people are probably overstating how good Christian Benford's been playing. I've been hearing a lot of like, he's the best cornerback in football and he's an all pro. I don't think he's there yet, but he's playing really good. Top 15 cornerback in the NFL. And I think Rasul Douglas is probably right in that mix too, maybe top 20 cornerback in the NFL. I've been really hard on Taylor Rapp. I didn't see the vision for him. I didn't see him fitting into the defense the way everybody told me he would. He actually does. He fits in very well to this defense. And I think he and Hamlin are playing pretty well off of each other. We heard Rapp talk about his relationship with Hamlin, and that's so big in that safety room. Like, I know people want to change. They want Mike Edwards in there. I don't think you're going to see like I actually like Mike Edwards a lot. I wanted him in free agency. I think he's a good player. I don't think he's ain't that much different than DeMar Hamlin. Cole Bishop, maybe. I think the ceiling's higher and I could see it, but communication and knowing this defense is such a big part of what goes on in the safety room. And I think we often think of safeties as individuals, but I think that it's actually the pairing that matters more than the individual pieces. And I think they're playing off each other pretty well here. And then just Babbage. You heard McDermott kind of jokingly, but say it when asked about the red zone defense and said, hey, we have a better play caller back there right now. And I do think he's doing just enough different in terms of calling certain defenses and certain looks than McDermott did to throw off the tendencies. I think this defense got a little stale under McDermott and Leslie Frazier for a few years. And some of the tendencies of what McDermott and Leslie Frazier wanted to do got a little old, and you're seeing some new stuff coming in with Babbage. The one area that I'd like to see this defense get better at as the season ramps up is pressure. We saw a little bit of it here this week. Greg Rousseau did really good against a bad right tackle. But we're not seeing a lot of interior pressure. I know Eric has pointed that out, and we're not getting a lot of pressure from AJ Epinesa. I mean, there's some of it. He gets there sometimes. But we need Vaughn back. We need Ed Oliver to get healthy and be the disruptive player that he's been in the past. And we need a little bit more pressure on the quarterback, because I think that'll help some of the concerns and deficiencies that I do see, like with the safety room or hurt linebackers at this moment. If you're getting pressure, you can offset some of those deficiencies and get the ball out quicker or get pressure on the quarterback. We know what an impact that has. So if I had to pick one area I want to see growth here over the next month, is I'd like to see them generating a little bit more pressure. But Greg Rousseau, man, this might be the one thing we probably should have worked a little harder to get. I know we got Spencer Brown locked up, and I had put out a post of like, who do you lock up, Groot or Spencer Brown first? And nothing against Spencer Brown. He's playing awesome. I'm glad they're taking care of him, but not getting Greg Rousseau locked up before the season started might backfire on us a little bit. Like, his agent is just piling up reasons and millions of dollars into his contract of why he needs to get paid. So that's going to be a tough one to approach. If he keeps on playing the way he's playing, he might play himself right out of Buffalo's affordability. But that's such a great problem to deal with later.
Absolutely. And I love what Rousseau has done this year. You know, people will look at the raw sack numbers, but I think he's doing everything else the right way and how you want him to develop. He's already been such a great run defender at the edge, but when you talk about how much pressure he's been generated, my favorite clip, and I think it was either you or Anthony, I can't remember who posted this, but the clip of him getting doubled and he put his arm up and tipped the pass, the functionality he has as an edge presence beyond just pass rush.
Gino pointed it out before that clip. He pointed him out and slid protection to him, and it didn't matter. He just manhandled those guys and almost came away with the interception. Just a great play.
Yeah. And I think my thing about the Bills' defensive line is I totally agree. I want more pressure. And I'm kind of annoyed because I feel like it's possible just with their interior. And it's really weird that their interior is taking this really big, not big, but a step back from what they were in the first half before DQJ got hurt last year. It was like kind of uncanny, the difference in what they looked like now versus what you saw in, I think it was weeks 1 through 5 last year, and how big of an impact that was. But I feel like it hasn't woken up yet, and it will. And if it does, and it happens at a crucial stretch, then I'm excited for that. But if it doesn't, that is a problem and something I would like to see addressed in the draft this upcoming year, because I know there's a couple of DTs from your big school, Aaron. There's two DTs from Michigan that might be available potentially for the Bills that I know one of them is a true run stuffer that I would love. But it's a situation where I don't think their D line has played like the strongest unit like I thought it would, but everything else, when it's healthy and when it's clicking, has been a lot of fun to watch. The safety room is really hard to evaluate, and I appreciate you fighting the good fight about Hamlin. I don't think Hamlin is the greatest. I think Hamlin plays a position that can get criticized way too easily because, a safety is a direct result in my eyes of the scheme, and you could put a safety in the wrong position or an offense can make it so you thought he had the right position and he didn't. And then people will see the safety and the cushion in front of the player that gave up or that he gave the reception up to and say, how could you do that? But I don't think that's all on Hamlin. But I don't think Hamlin's the greatest. But I also think Hamlin has played solid ball. And that's kind of what I expected from him. And ultimately, we're used to having perennial all-pros in that safety room that anything else at this point that wasn't literally the two best safeties in the NFL was going to be a drop-off. It's so hard to be an improvement. And people are going to see that and start pointing fingers at it with the expectation that you're supposed to be Poyer and Hyde. We'd love that. I think that. But
I'd say, I think, I've heard a lot of people clamoring for Micah Hyde to return. I think Damar Hamlin's played better than Micah Hyde last year played.
Yeah, last year was not the greatest year for
it wasn't a great year.
Safeties.
Yeah.
No, they lost a step.
I would encourage everyone that is frustrated. One, adequate play in the NFL isn't bad, right? Like we're like, oh, this player stinks, but like being adequate at your job is not great. Like part of the problem for this conversation about the safety and specifically Hamlin is he is the probably most limited, worst player in that defensive backfield. But again, we just said like Benford's a top 15 corner. Rasul Douglas is probably a top 15, 20 corner, right? Taron Johnson's an all-pro player. So yeah, he's the worst out of a very good room. So it's easy to point. He's definitely a lightning rod for that stuff. But in terms of the points saved from Sports Information Solutions, he's like top 10 in points saved at the safety position. So we highlighted that Jets tackle that Taylor Rapp had. Damar Hamlin's been very good at stopping a lot of the big plays, and people get frustrated because it's like 9-10 yards downfield, but it's not 30 to 40 yard big plays. They are playing the safety. It is called safety for a reason, right? To not allow stuff behind you. They will. But I would encourage people to watch some other games, watch Red Zone. I know Quandre Diggs was a name that people were throwing out in the trade. I just saw Quandre Diggs last week get burnt on a bad angle. Gibbs blasted off the side, and Quandre Diggs was like a terrible angle that if Damar Hamlin did it, people would be like, we need to run him out of town. And so we don't judge these players in the same lens that we should judge all players. Every single week, Joe, all I see is safeties, bad angles, missing tackles, giving up cushions to your point, and stuff like that. So we got to judge it by, who they are in the league and in their peers. And I think when you do that, I think Damar is actually probably playing. He's not top 10, top 20, but I bet he's probably like top 40, 50 out of 60 something starting safeties, right? And so he's not the worst. And there could be better, but I don't know that it's outside the building. And I think I can see a scenario where we see Cole Bishop do what Matt Milano did his rookie year, where towards the end of the season, he took over for Ramon Humber. I don't know if everybody remembers that late in the year. I could see a scenario like that playing, but right now, the last couple of weeks, Damar has not done anything to give an inch on that job being given up.
Shout out to Ramon Humber, one of the coolest face masks I've still ever seen in a Bills uniform. But I agree. And, neither of us are sitting here preaching that they're the two best safeties in the league, but they're serviceable. And when you
people will say I'm standing for him. People are like, oh, you're such a fanboy. But it's like, dude, I'm just defending that it's okay.
Yeah, and it's a tough position to play, and you have to have an insane knowledge of the scheme to be perfect. And there are times where Hamlin does take a bad angle, and times where a play he wants back, but he's also not the worst in the league. And again, the expectation's high naturally from Poyer and Hyde. I'm fine with it. I also think, again, this Bills season, the better they do is house money to me. I knew it was going to be a transitional year. It didn't mean that I thought they weren't going to be competitive. I just knew it wasn't going to be perfect given some of the moves they made. So if they're getting good safety play with the room they've put together and haven't even tapped into their rookie resource yet, okay.
Yep.
I'm cool with it. But to some of the points you made too, Vaughn is going to be such a big part of this. I really think that the month off was huge for the rest standpoint, as you pointed out and someone in our chat pointed out. But I also don't think there's really a ramp up for him. I think he's just going to come in and play the same role he's been, because it wasn't like he was getting a majority of the snap share anyways. He was just a true pass rush guy with occasional run defense snaps. And to me, that's all you need him to be. And getting that back after he's had time to kind of refresh, train in the background and be good, that's very fun. And I hope that helps him, as far as the duration of a season at his age, especially with his injury history, because you get Vaughn in those late stretches, that's huge. And he looked every bit, I don't want to say every bit as good as the past, but he looked good. He looked like a Von Miller we wanted to see. And he's, a sack in every game before he got suspended. You brought up Greg Rousseau. Again, I'm a big fan of Greg Rousseau. I think Greg, yes, has definitely earned a big contract. I wonder if the raw sack numbers are going to go against him, even if it's not totally his fault that he's not generating sacks. But I love having him at the edge, and I think his continued development and presence on the field and him staying healthy is going to help this D-line, even if it's still struggling to get some pressure. You brought up Teron Johnson again. What this defense can look like with him is a night and day difference, especially when you talk about from run defense. And I think people hyper-focused on the fact that Johnson wasn't in, so you got to get out of the nickel and bring that extra linebacker in, but you kind of want to have that heavy personnel when you face physical defenses. Teron Johnson's basically a linebacker. Like, he basically is. He plays like one. He has the speed. He has the tackling prowess. Like, he has the coverage ability where I don't feel like I need to put that third linebacker in when Teron Johnson's on the field. So, like, we shouldn't take him off of it unless you want to decide to go to dime and bring an extra DB and pair with him. But I love him. I think having him back and having him healthy is so big for a defense that kind of needed to find more of a physical approach, and he brings it. You talk about the corners. I have nothing but good things to say about Benford and Douglas so far this year. As expected, that room has been fortified, and it's been a lot of fun. I hope for their continued health, knocking on wood. And I'll end this with Bobby Babich. Again, rookie coordinator. There were going to be lumps. There were going to be times where it looked rocky, but I think what he's done has been really good for the circumstances he's been given. Again, it's not a perfect defense by any stretch, but I think he has them playing at a very good level. I have seen them at times where they're getting, and you talk about the anti-yards movement. They give up yards, but if they're coming through in key spots, I'll take a field goal every time. Like, I'll take a key takeaway like they've been doing. He's been getting them in the right positions a lot. Obviously, the beginning of game script dictates it a little bit. The scripted plays that offenses are bringing out can sometimes catch them off guard a little bit, but they adjust. And the adjustments, especially in the second half, are really how I'm evaluating him, because a bad coordinator isn't going to have a team as ready to kind of pivot and make the correct reads, everything in the second half like he has. So I'm very impressed. And if I had to give you one thing that I really want more of, you talked about pressure. I want them to blitz a bit more. I just feel like if you're talking about the concern over the D-line getting consistent pressure, why don't you aid that by upticking your blitz percentage? Because they're one of the lowest in the league currently. In fact, I have the rate right here. Throughout the season so far, they are currently sitting at a 29th in blitz percentage right now. So I want them to do a little bit more. And I'm not saying you have to do it every snap. I'm not saying it has to be the core identity of your defense, but adding in some more 5-6 pressures, a little bit more frequently, I don't think hurts. And they have brought pressure. It's not that they haven't at all, but more consistently throughout a game, I think can really lend itself well if you're worried about the pass rush. And then if anything, similar to the conversation we had earlier, where I talked about how the O-line and their blocking might have helped James Cook develop a little bit, maybe the enhanced pressure and the teams that they're facing feeling threatened by that can help this pass rush a little bit more, maybe give them some confidence and juice and ultimately make it a little bit more formidable. But, at this point in the season, with all the offseason evaluation, the doom and gloom that ran rampant, I'm very pleased with what they've done so far. I think there's definitely room for improvement, but I don't think they've played their best ball yet, and I'm ready to see what they do, especially when Bernard comes back on the field. So, AQ, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I love your point on the blitz stuff, but I would be interested to see if obviously Milano didn't get hurt and Bernard's in. Like, would that be more? That's something they're very good at. And I think, again, if I was to put on a defensive coordinator hat, that's something I would want to do, is like put them both, mug them up in that A gap. And like, one of these guys is coming. Who is it? And the other one can drop back into coverage and not be a vulnerability. And, and talking about DeMar Hamlin, before his incident, one of his strengths was blitzing, getting him up and around the line of scrimmage. He was a very good blitzer. And Teron Johnson is a very good blitzer off the edge. And so you have some multiple things where you could bring the safety up, whether it's Rapp or Hamlin, you could bring them up and have two linebackers mugging that A gap. And then you have Teron, you have freaking 8 guys on the line and nobody knows who's coming, and then 3 drop back and one extra guy comes, and that's the type of stuff additional to what we talk about, the pre-post snap zone looks that the Bills throw, is those blitz looks. And I do think, again, you don't have to do it all the time, but a little bit more to speed up quarterbacks would be nice to see. But I wonder how much of that is they're down a little bit at linebacker. The safety room is still developing some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Teron Johnson wasn't on the field for weeks. So I wonder if some of that has been baked into the numbers we're seeing of the decline, or if it is just Babbitt and McDermott are such different play callers, because we saw a big bump in blitzing when McDermott was calling the plays last year. Now that Babbitt has taken over, I don't know if it's from injuries or if that's just more of his philosophy is to not blitz as heavy. So we'll find out once they get a little more healthy here.
Yeah, this is the first year of Babbage, and it's very likely that he just loves 4-man pressures. And, should he stay in
That's
Buffalo?
The best way. If you can do 4-man pressures and drop guys into coverage and it's successful and you can get pressures, that's the best, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah.
I'm not against that philosophically at all. I just don't think right now they're winning enough with 4-man pressures.
No.
So it's like, let's help that out until we finally can. And maybe Vaughn coming back does that, especially someone brought up the NASCAR package point. I'm trying to find it. I lost it here, but that's all a part of it where I say, I would like to see them do it more to aid that room. Also, like for a team that loves simulated pressures and creeper pressures and sending different guys at different points, I also feel like just bringing more bodies just all of a sudden makes an offense kind of guess even more. And maybe they are waiting, or maybe they're waiting until they get to the winter and get to the colder months and the playoff push potentially, where they just want to pull that out of their hat. And all of a sudden teams that weren't seeing the Bills send more than 4 are like, oh no, they brought it out and we have no idea how they're sending it. And now this is a problem that we have to pivot to. So all possible. It's a minor gripe. I think the defense for what we expected has been good, and I'm very pleased and excited for the road ahead. And Aaron, let's pivot to our final topic. I'll kind of mesh these final 2 topics together for the sake of time, but let's talk about how they keep the momentum going. If there's something that you feel has been working consistently, offensively, defensively, what do you think it is, and how do they continue it on as they get against Miami in Buffalo this Sunday?
Yeah, I think the way to really get Miami is, like you said, one, go up early. If you have a chance to get the ball, go up early and kind of neuter their offense. Like I said, this is a super tough game to really get a hold of who this year's Miami Dolphins are, right? With the injury to Tua early, they've been terrible. I don't think they're a terrible team. Like, they weren't just 6 months ago. They weren't well, towards the end of the year they were. So maybe 8 months ago, they weren't a terrible team. They have the playmakers to really actually do some damage to this Bills defense if their offense is allowed to play the game in the way they want, whether it is speed run, or you get, obviously we've had success against Tyreek Hill here over the last few years, but that type of speed has been something that has been in a bit of an Achilles heel to the Bills throughout the McDermott era. The Bills defense isn't fast, right? It is all about everybody being on the same page. So those would be some concerns. But in terms of big picture going forward, for me, it's continuing to win at the line of scrimmage. I think you're going to win more games than not if you win the line of scrimmage for 4 quarters and play the physical style of football, not just at the line of scrimmage, at all phases, the way Keon Coleman's blocking, the way that we're seeing safeties come up and hit, the way that we're seeing cornerbacks like Rasul Douglas come up and hit. If you can play that type of physical football for 4 quarters, I think you're going to beat most teams. You're going to win 80% of your games. Like, you're at least going to be in the games. That's hard to do for 4 quarters. And so I want to see them continue to dominate on the line of scrimmage, and specifically against Miami coming up. I think if you can continue to run the ball and use both those running backs and then play off of that in the play action, that's going to be too much for them to handle. And I think presenting that type of physical game is something that Miami hasn't really seen from us, right? It's always been Josh Allen doing superhero Josh Allen stuff to get past Miami and leaning on some of the big explosive plays and stuff. We haven't really come out and just punched them in the mouth with physicality. And I think that is going to be actually a much easier task than it has been in the past. Their defense is reeling. They're not playing great. There's not a lot of confidence over there in Miami. And while they really want to beat the Bills, like that's their big thing. It's not quite what the Patriots did to the Bills during the drought years, but it's getting there. We're getting close to that type of domination. And every time the Bills come to town or meet up with Miami, that's the talking point. Like, can you guys get over the hump? Maybe that'll be enough motivation for them to do it this time. But there's some confidence level that, like, if you get down early in a game against a team that continues to do that to you year in and year out, it's hard to just kind of it's hard to not just like kind of pack it in and be like, oh, here we go again. They're just going to get us. And so I want to see them remain physical. And that's beyond Miami, right? You're going to have a tough stretch coming up when they face, what is it, Detroit, San Francisco. Like, there's going to be a
LA.
real tough stretch of some of those NFC games and things like that. And you don't even need to win those games, right? Those ones aren't going to be as important if you're wrapping up the division, whatever, by Thanksgiving or early December. But those are going to be physical games that are going to test you. And that's where I want to see, is when they get up to a physical team, can they match that type of physicality that a Detroit Lion has? I don't know if they can, but I want to see it. They've been more physical than most of the teams they've played. Obviously not the Ravens. The Ravens were right there and kind of punched them in the face, but everyone else, they've been more physical. If you can maintain that physicality in this league, I think you're going to continue to win.
That Ravens game also, I don't like using injuries as an excuse, but in the front seven specifically, they were super banged up. They didn't have Bernard in that game, and I don't think Johnson was playing in that game either. No. And those are integral pieces of how your front seven is constructed and their identity on defense. So I think that game is going to give a sour taste to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And yet, even in the second half of that game, before the trick play nonsense, the defense started adjusting and started shutting down Baltimore. Before the trick play from hell ruined all their momentum, I will continue to scoff and laugh and hate that play for an eternity. But I agree with all your points, Aaron. The physicality aspect is huge. It's been something that the Bills have tried to really make a core part of their team for the past 2 seasons. I think they're succeeding in it, but consistently doing it is another thing. You can try all you want to build this team up to be physical. It's another thing to consistently execute. I think they have the potential to, but really in the trenches specifically, more so with the D-line, I'd like to see, again, more interior presence and establish your DTs as actually being feared and being someone that can disrupt a play, especially in the backfield, because the common thread in a lot of those teams you mentioned, actually in all of them, is the fact that they can run the ball effectively with physical downhill running. So if you can penetrate the interior of those teams' offensive lines with serviceable or even really good DT play, then you're going to have a chance in every game, but those DTs need to step up. And that's something I want to see them do more, specifically defensively. If they do, I mean, if you're getting what you saw in the first half of the season, the thing that they sold you on, and it actually happens this year, that defensive line and that group is going to be really difficult to deal with, especially when you have Milano eventually come back, Bernard comes back, hopefully can stay on the field, and Johnson's there with them. If you get this Bills defense back to full strength, I just see it as being a very difficult team to deal with, even for the best teams. Not saying they won't get their punches off or get their shots in. That happens every game. But rather, on a consistent play-to-play basis, you really got to put effort into how you're going to combat them. And it might not be successful for these teams, especially NFC teams that don't really deal with the Bills often. I mean, San Francisco's coming to Buffalo in the beginning of December. That's a different beast. And to me, as good as San Francisco is, I could very well see that turn into a Dallas game again, where San Francisco just comes and gets punched straight into the mouth. They're a better team than Dallas was. I don't actually think it'll be a blowout, but rather that they're just not as prepared. So the physicality component definitely matters. And that's something I'll agree with you and be lockstep on, especially against Miami, where you seem to physically bully them the last game, do it again. And for me on offense, just keep the under center play action going. Keep the play action specifically going, because what that is doing for this Bills offense, for Josh Allen as a passer in all of his advanced metrics, but really just for his game feel and flow, it's such a huge asset. And for a Miami defense that, one, got slower at safety, two, might not have Javon Holland in this game, another gigantic factor for a Miami defense that has essentially been reeling. And three, really at this point, the strength seems to be in their linebackers, and for how often maybe they'll try to blitz you, trying to slow them down a little bit. The play action to me for this game and games ahead is an integral part of what this offense could be, a part of their identity that I think will make them insanely difficult to stop. Pair it with your really good downhill runners and the emergence of Ray Davis, and I think you have a recipe for a team that, even in a transitional year, looks to be one of the top teams in the conference and maybe in the NFL. So that's all I got. AQ, any final thoughts before we say goodnight to these lovely people?
Yeah, no, man. Like you said, make sure everybody smashes on that like button and comments and does all the stuff. Joe working wicked hard over here. Appreciate you. We're glad to have you as part of the network. And it matters. It's free. And it helps out tremendously in the algorithm to give it a like, give it a comment, wherever platform you're on. You guys know what to do. You've been on the internet long enough. Help him out here. And appreciate you having me on, man. This is a great talk. I miss our Friday morning Twitter Spaces. We'll have to get on Discord, so then all these people that join One Pass because you told them to can get in Discord, and we'll start doing some Friday morning Discords. How about that?
Yeah, man. The Discords, the few we've done so far have been fun, and I love those discussions. And the Discord chats are awesome because, like, again, you got all the people that are part of the One Pass already, so their insight, the people, they bring the heat, man. Those discussions are great, and like everyone's just like contributing such interesting things. It's fun. So I mean, AQ, as always, thank you for being here, man. I appreciate you so much. You want to give a quick plug to your show tomorrow night? What you got going on?
Yeah, sure. It's going to be Greg and I every Wednesday night. So if you haven't tuned into any of the Cover One Buffalo, we do every Wednesday night. And then obviously we are post-game shows. But this week we're having our good old friend Marcel Louis-Jacques for the Dolphins preview. And that should be a fun one. We try to catch up with Marcel every single year. We've had no Mina Kimes. We're not Anthony over here bringing in the big stars, but we've had a nice stretch here. We had Connor Rogers, who's one of our really great friends, Ben Baldwin. We're having obviously Marcel on, and so we've been having a lot of fun talking those matchups through. We really enjoy that show, and then obviously the post-game shows are so much fun, especially when they're on a winning streak. Like the losing ones are cathartic and it's therapeutic, but when they win games, especially like they did in Seattle, it's such a fun time to hop in the post-game show and be involved in the comments. So make sure you're checking us out and all the shows on the Cover One Network. While you're here, if you're on YouTube, hit that notification bell, subscribe to our channel, because if you like this content by Joe, we've got shows almost every night of the week, multiple shows certain nights of the week, and we're really excited to bring you all that content. So make sure you jump in and join us.
Absolutely. Yeah, guys, this network is booming right now, and a lot of great things being put out by all of our content creators, all of our videos that, Eric and everyone's working on in the live shows. It's just a constant stream of content for Bills fans and football fans. So again, check it out, like, subscribe, shout out to the One Pass. Check it out in the description below. Aaron, always a great time. I appreciate you being here, man. You're a hell of a guest. And these guys, their show, if you somehow haven't checked it out, if you're a Cover One subscriber, some of the finest content we put out in the network. And you didn't even drop Brett Coleman either, another guest. You guys
Brett Coleman. I know.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, that was awesome. So check them out tomorrow night, guys. But, again, I appreciate every one of you being here. Aaron, thank you for finding me on Cover One's Got Talent just 2 short years ago. That was a great experience. I know some of my vocal performances weren't the greatest, but you were always very graceful to me. So I'm happy to be here, man. And, even though you say to stop giving you credit, you are the reason I'm here. So thank you. And appreciate all of you, appreciate you. And for all of you guys, I hope the Bills pull it out this Sunday. I hope the momentum continues. But thank you for being here. Drop a like on this video if you haven't already. Share it with your friends. If you're on our audio platforms, be sure to rate 5 stars and check it out on Apple, Spotify, Google, everywhere you podcast. But for us, we're done. I'm going to go let the Yankees ruin my evening. All of you have a great rest of your night, and go Bills.